Before a man first set foot on the moon, no one truly believed science fiction could become science fact. It would take all of NASA's planning, calculations, and training to get us there. With the Apollo 11 mission, the dream became a reality.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Less than a year after the first man landed on the moon, Jack Swigert, Fred Hayes, and Commander Jim Lovell were ready for their mission. On April 11th, 1970, at exactly 13:13, Apollo 13 set course for the moon.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It was a destination they would never reach.
We may have had an instrumentation problem.
On the 13th day in April, everything that could go wrong did.
He had a pretty large bank. Houston, we've had a problem. Had a B bus thunderbolt.
Okay, now let's everybody keep cool. Let's solve the problem, but let's not make it any worse by discussing.
And for 5 days, America and the world prayed for a miracle.
Houston, we have a problem.
All right, here we go.
The Sci-Fi Channel presents an in-depth look at the making of the new Ron Howard film from Universal Pictures, Apollo 13, starring Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton, Kathleen Quinlan, Ed Harris, and Gary Sinise.
That's wrong.
In the next half hour, journey behind the scenes on one of America's most gripping dramas.
We got a wicked shimmy up here.
Explore the massive undertaking of recreating NASA in 1970.
They don't have control? Did we miss a step here?
And experience, through never-before-seen footage, how the filmmakers joined forces with NASA to film in a completely weightless environment.
Motion pictures in 0G.
The Apollo missions opened a new door in space exploration. But as the events of Apollo 13 show, that advancement came with great risks. Hello, I'm Dr. Sally Ride. As a former astronaut, I know those risks. I flew in space on the 7th and 13th Space Shuttle missions, and though those missions weren't trouble-free, it was nothing compared to what the astronauts of Apollo 13 experienced. In the next half hour, we'll relive that harrowing experience through a behind-the-scenes look at the making of the new film, Apollo 13.
Okay, we're gonna rack back that way. Let's try rehearsal. Stand by, please.
Director Ron Howard brings to life this gripping drama, the true story of 3 astronauts struggling to survive in a crippled spacecraft, and of the commitment of the men and women of NASA, whose task it was to bring them home alive.
The odds against them making it back were kind of 10 to 1. The more I kept learning about the actual mission, the more I realized just how dramatic the truth in this particular instance is.
Short of landing a man on the moon in the first place, which all of mankind has been waiting for ever since, he first looked up at the moon, this is second place, without question. Going back to the moon wasn't as difficult as getting Apollo 13 back.
This is a movie that is really about not just the 3 astronauts, but the people in mission control and the astronauts' families as they stopped and prayed for the return of these guys.
It's a motion picture that's kind of bigger than all of us, and it's just something that we're so proud to be a part of, and it's one of the greatest human interest stories of all time.
Give me a go, no-go for launch. Booster.
Go.
Retro.
Go.
FAO.
We are go.
Capcom.
We're go flight.
We are go for launch.
The clock is running.
Houston, we have cleared tower at 13:13.
They've lifted off, and for 2 days, everything is perfectly normal.
EDS to manual inboard.
And that, gentlemen, is how we do that.
Okay, guys. We're going to the moon.
We're up there in the capsule, we're on our way, and looks like everything's gonna go fine.
This is the crew of the Apollo 13, wishing everyone back on Earth a pleasant evening.
All of a sudden, a couple 100,000 miles from Earth,
About 2/3 of the way to the moon, a slight defect, finally surrendered to Murphy's Law.
And there's a big explosion.
This explosion that completely crippled the spacecraft. Let's get that hatch button. The limb might have been hit by a meteor.
Odyssey, we need a conversation. What systems do you have down?
Houston, we have a main bus A undervolt.
Econ, what's your data telling you?
It's reading a quadruple failure. That can't happen.
At first, they really don't know exactly what it is.
We are venting something out into space.
I can see it outside of window 1 right now.
It's got to be the oxygen.
Hell yes, they were scared. They were very aware of emergency procedures, although they had never anticipated a quadruple failure.
We're not going to have power much longer. The ship's bleeding to death.
The Apollo 13 spacecraft has lost all electrical power.
Why do you have loss of radio contact? The whole world was kind of focused on these 3 guys floating around in this tin can that very easily could have just bounced off into space and become a floating museum.
Fredo, how long does it take to power up the LEM?
3 hours by the checklist.
We don't have that much time.
Coming up, we'll take an in-depth look at how the filmmakers recreated the world of Apollo 13.
What's the story here, Jack? Hey, Jim, that's MRCS.
In recreating the events of Apollo 13, the filmmakers and the cast and the crew were committed to making every aspect of the production as authentic as possible. In order to do so, the filmmakers worked closely with NASA consultants, many of whom were part of the original Apollo 13 mission.
Okay, let's shoot it.
Picture. Here we go. Quiet, please.
And camera action. Action! I think we all feel this is sort of a rare opportunity. We'd hate to look back on this project and say that we didn't do our homework, that we didn't try to understand what it was to be an astronaut, what it was to be a mission controller, to experience it.
One of the areas in which the production was able to convey detailed accuracy was in the recreation of mission control in Houston. So much so that it almost fooled the experts.
When I first walked into the set, I could have sworn I was in Houston. They've got it so accurate that it's a little bit eerie.
Ron is an absolute fanatic about every little detail being correct. You know, I spend 14 hours a day here, and I leave and I go look for the elevator. You know, because the real control center in Houston was up on the 3rd floor, and I forget, this thing is so real.
Jerry Griffin and Jerry Bostick were original mission control members on Apollo 13 and were brought in by the filmmakers to be technical consultants for the many scenes that take place in mission control.
We're in the process of transferring over to the LEM now. We've sucked some juice out of one of the reentry batteries.
And we need to think about that. We should be okay. These actors were like sponges. You just couldn't give them enough. And they kept asking questions, and they would want the next level of detail and the next level of detail. Well, I think it's going to show in the movie.
Flight, I recommend we shut down the reactant valves of the fuel cells.
What the hell good is that going to do?
If that's where the leak is, we can isolate it there, and we can save what's left in the tanks, and we can run on the good cell.
You close them, you can't open them again. You can't land on the moon with one healthy fuel cell.
From my chair here, this is the last option.
For help in designing the authentic look of Apollo 13, the production turned to Max Airy and Spaceworks of the Kansas Cosmosphere, a space science museum dedicated to the preservation of American space program artifacts.
One of the primary reasons that those of us here at the Kansas Cosmosphere really wanted to participate in this film was Ron Howard's great desire to add realism and authenticity and historic accuracy in this film. We are producing all of the spacesuits, and one of the great challenges there is that no one has really tried to build replica spacesuits that were fully functional, all the hardware, all of the ventilation systems inside, and so on.
I feel it coming out of the back of my neck.
Yeah, it's supposed to come up into the helmet.
I see.
I've been looking forward to the day when I could don the pressure suit.
And what's this?
It's a pressure gauge. It's a delta pressure gauge. The suit, so you can see what pressure you're pumped up to.
We're also building the interiors of all of the spacecraft that will be seen in the movie, the command modules, the lunar modules, and in some cases, actual artifacts from Apollo 13 from inside the spacecraft will be seen in this movie.
This is from one of the Flight Apollo spacecraft. There's a very good possibility that this one came out of Apollo 13. We do have a lot of original Apollo 13 hardware here. There were 2 of these in each Apollo command module. They function more or less the way that the artificial horizons do in aircraft, as far as giving them a visual reference as to the attitude of their spacecraft.
Altitude is on the line. Velocity right on the line.
For the actors, working in such a realistic environment greatly enhanced their performances, as did the on-set consultation with Apollo 15 Commander Dave Scott and the real-life commander of Apollo 13, Jim Lovell.
I think the fascination that I always had in the space program and in the story as well is in the tiny little particulars. Oh, that's how they did that. Oh, that's what they went through. Oh, it was so cold in the spacecraft that you could actually see your breath. And I'd ask Jim that. I said, so how cold was it? Oh, got around about 36, 38 degrees. So you could see your breath through, yeah, those last couple of days, yeah, it was pretty cold. That's the way he puts it.
Jim Lovell even took time for something few astronauts ever get to do: act in a movie.
These actors have surrounded themselves with the real astronauts in order to play these roles authentically.
It's been a process of trying to become comfortable with astronaut speak, because what sounds like a foreign language to laymen like myself is just second nature to them. We have Dave Scott, who's on the set almost every day, who was a tremendously helpful resource.
Yeah. But, you know, we're supposed to have the comm link right here that we have to, you know, when we're talking to NASA, we got to...
PTT. Push to talk.
Push to talk.
Usually on a hot mic internal, but a push to talk to the ground.
Where was that? Was it right
in your chest?
Here in your chest.
It's pretty easy to read.
So we stay hot. We're hot to each other.
I'm really impressed with the authenticity of the way they're doing this. And they're so interested in getting this accurate and precise down to not only the word, but the inflection of the word and the meaning behind the word.
Houston, we have a main bus A undervolt now, too. It's reading 25.5. Main bus B is reading zip right now. We got a wicked shimmy up here.
We build into every scene the switches that we'll be working on and the procedures that we'll be doing. So if we have a flight plan or a systems manual in our hand, we're actually turned to the page that we're talking about.
Tom Hanks is Commander Jim Lovell. I mean, he's spent a lot of time with Jim, but he's also obviously done a lot of research. I really believe Tom could fly a mission.
Our gimbals are good. Our trim is good. Get ready for a little choke, fellas.
That was some little joke.
The challenge the filmmakers faced was filming the weightless space sequences. When we come back, we'll see how NASA played an integral part in tackling that challenge. NASA's been able to simulate many aspects of space, including weightlessness. It was this expertise that led the filmmakers to ask NASA for help in filming the movie's many scenes that take place in a weightless environment.
Well, folks, let's head on down to the Lunar Excursion Module. Follow me.
We were talking about how we were going to have to try to create zero gravity on the stage, how to pull that illusion off. And we're using every cinematic tool at our disposal. Every trick in the book is going into this. But for a number of the shots, I thought, well, there must be some way to actually work in zero gravity.
To achieve the unprecedented goal of filming in an actual zero-gravity environment, the filmmakers turned to NASA's astronaut training program and an aircraft unlike any other.
I've known about the KC-135 zero-G plane for a while, and I didn't quite know how it worked. But I'd heard that there was, you know, that there was a way that the astronauts simulated zero gravity.
It flies in a parabola. It goes at 45-degree angle up, and then it pitches over at 30,000 feet.
And then it does sort of like a giant roller coaster maneuver and goes over the top.
And as you're going up over, well, the inertia carries you still up. And as it goes over and pitches down, you're essentially in free fall inside the cabin.
So you lift, and that begins the zero-G. We're not going to be able to work in the way that you usually work because we have a limited amount of time. We have to very specifically rehearse a whole series of shots. So we're breaking it down as meticulously as we can in terms of action, camera angles, lighting, and so forth, so that we can go in there and get as many shots as possible. It's kind of like a 2-minute drill in football, where you know, time is working against you, and you just have to go do it. We know this is going to be hard, and it's challenging on a lot of levels, but it's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we want to try to do it right. So we have a fully authentic command module and lunar module that's been built to safely go inside the KC-135, and we're shooting a good hunk of our movie that way. When they pull up, they start pulling 2 Gs, which is twice what you're used to. So your face presses back a little bit, and whatever position you're in, you really feel it.
I remember I was sitting next to Kevin, and then we were joking and talking about eating cheeseburgers and everything, and then as we started to go up and we felt our chins just started to be pulled down, we just, oh, man, I thought, man, I'm going to blow my cheese for sure.
Yeah, it's called the vomit comet.
They call it the vomit comet because almost everybody gets sick on this thing eventually. It's best to lay down and just take it all through your chest and everything. And then it goes over the top. All of a sudden, everything just starts to lighten. And it's just like you're almost tossed up, and suddenly you're floating.
You literally pop right up into zero gravity. It feels like you've just been spun upside down. All the blood goes into your head, and it feels like when you're in a Rocco plane at the amusement park, it just feels like you just got spun upside down. You think, hey, I'm upside down. No, I'm not. What's wrong? Why is it different? Oh, I'm floating.
Well, once we feel the lift, then everybody goes to their starting positions, camera rolls, and I say action, and we've got about 12 to 14 seconds of zero gravity to work with.
Floater dumbbell.
And we were all learning how to do it. And I was off directing on the sidelines upside down sometimes. Float. Yeah, it looks pretty good, Tom.
It's a very tight atmosphere to work in. It's very frenetic because everybody's screaming at each other, trying to get it going.
30. Here we go. 30.
And then everybody has to get to a safe position because as you pull out of it, if you're up by the ceiling, you just go smacking down onto the floor.
Yeah, we got
suction right down.
Some battle scars already.
A couple of spots here.
Bill took a whack on the head.
The first day or so, they were flailing around. And by the 3rd or 4th day of filming, their movements were, much smoother, much more under control.
We could get all the shots that really sell the zero gravity, passing things and going through the tunnel, and stuff that would just take days to do with cables. And then we got used to it, we started floating around, and pretty soon we were having the time of our lives up there. We just couldn't get enough of it.
You know what the best part is when you're not in the shot. You got to go through the parabolas anyway, and that's like fun time. When my wife initially saw the footage of us, she said there was this kind of look of bliss on my face that she had never seen, and it was kind of childlike. And it is a very amazing experience the first time when you fly like Peter Pan. It's nothing like anything that you can really describe.
In between shots, Tom Hanks and I would look at each other, and it's just, can you believe we're doing this? We're doing this! we're in zero gravity!
When we come back, we'll look at the endless obstacles the astronauts of Apollo 13 faced as they fought their way back to Earth in a powerless spacecraft. With a crippled spacecraft, the crew of Apollo 13 had to abandon its plans to land on the moon. Their mission quickly turned into a life-or-death situation in their struggle to get home.
They just had no margin for error anymore. None. Every step of the mission from that point on was critical, crucial.
Odyssey, this is Houston.
We've got serious time pressure here, Jim.
How much time? Can you give me a number?
Well, we're looking at less than 15 minutes of life support in the Odyssey.
Everything was kind of okay as long as it worked, and as long as their backup systems worked. But those things began to unravel.
Yeah, Jim, could you check your CO2 gauge for us?
Part of the problem was that all 3 guys were spending a lot of time in the LEM.
Yeah, Houston, we were just looking at that. Our CO2 measurement has jumped 4 notches in the last hour. The CO2 level built up and built up and built up. Now, if you start breathing too much CO2, you get a headache, and eventually you fall asleep and you never wake up again.
It's a movie that hopefully makes you understand what it was like to be there, what it was like to be in the capsule.
This rate, we're going to skip right out of the atmosphere, and we're never going to get back.
What it was like to be at home waiting for people that you loved to get back.
I have a request from the news people.
They can take it up with my husband. He'll be home on Friday.
What it was like to be in mission control with no sleep and trying to make the crucial calculation to send up to these 3 men who were relying on that information.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
That's why it's suspenseful, and that's why it's thrilling and exciting. That's why it makes a great story.
Why are so many people here? Something broke on your daddy's spaceship.
Gene, the Odyssey is dying.
It'll be the worst disaster NASA's ever experienced.
Ozzy, this is Houston. Do you read me?
With all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
The experience the astronauts and NASA gained from the events of Apollo 13 would help tremendously in the Apollo missions that followed, in the shuttle missions of today, and eventually in the space missions of the future. Though it was a harrowing 5 days, it truly can be called NASA's finest hour. I'm Dr. Sally Ride. Thanks for watching.
Hello, this is Richard Hart. This week on CNET Central, from outer space to cyberspace, it's extraterrestrial life, and you can find it on the internet. See our exclusive footage Sunday at 10:30 p.m., 7:30 Pacific on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Now stay tuned for Quantum Leap, next on the Sci-Fi Channel.